we can come up with legislation, we can come up with high tariffs. If I want my cheap import, I will find a way of buying it. That's how the globe. So when we look at globalization and globality, we've got to be waking up to it. As it is right now, Minister, you're aware of the SADC protocols we are going to have to comply with. And we are going that direction anyway. We're going in the direction where there's going to be boundaryless trade. There's going to be boundaryless movement of people and goods and services. And so how are you going to compete if you're going to be protected forever? Now, I sound very unkind because I know that there are people who are reeling because of that. And this is a very sensitive topic, but let's gloves off, let's go for it. I know there was a question that was raised. Gloves off, let's go, because we have been talking about protecting the local market for a long time. And what we should be talking about is how are we doing in making sure that we are very competitive. That is the bigger discussion. So we should be having, rather than the discussion of how do we make sure that we continue to have an uncompetitive product or service and think that we are going to export it. What we need to do is to be globally competitive, or recognizing the globalization and also recognizing the globality of what we are doing, so that whatever good or service is not just for Zimbabweans going forward. The goods and services will be for everybody else. We should be opening up call centers in Zimbabwe because of our literacy rate. But we need the technology. We need to be competitive at that sort of level. We should be sending all our products outside. Why should we be worrying about sugar or milk or that is coming? Why can't we make our milk exportable? That the other people are feeling our pinch. Why can we not make our chickens more exportable so that the other guys suffer the pain of us having our products in their markets? Because that will make us actually a prosperous nation the way that we should be. All right, I just thought I'd pull off some punches there, but we're going to have a question and answer, so I'm prepared to take some bullets as well in the process. So it's okay. So you give and take. So you can't just sit there and lash out at people and then say, look, and you can't touch me. No, you can. Now, the scenario I wanted to paint there is very simple. It's a diagram we're working with in our own organization. It's our own. But it's actually coming out of the Chantel Ilbury and Clem Santa, Mind of the Fox. Some of you have read that book, Mind of the Fox. And if you look at that book, it does about scenario planning. And I don't think we do a lot of scenario planning as businesses. Whether it's a small, medium enterprises, Minister Nyoni, we need to teach those that what if this happens, what is going to happen here? So there is need for a bit more scenario planning about where we are. So the scenario planning, there are 4 quadrants, Clem Santa and Chantel Ilbury. There are 4. There is the hard, on the top quadrants is the hard times, there is the prosperity, which is the new balls, please. The economy of the world are pumping. And below the 2 quadrants are forked lightning. That means there is just panic and pandemonium on the left side, and there is a ultraviolet, which is, we're not sure whether we're going up or going back, and there's a bit of some false stability. And then on the hard times one, it's like a W, it's not a V. People thought that the world recession will come and we'll get back into a boom again. But what has happened is a W, and it looks like it's a continuous W, which is not coming up to that peak because of what's happening in America, what's happening in China, what's happening in the Eurozone, and also what's happening in the financial markets. And we're talking about, on the top quadrants, we're talking about one world, where the world believes in itself. The global village is at peace with itself. But in the bottom quadrant, we're talking about a divided world. The divided world is now the problems we're seeing, the kind of spats that we had, Russia and America over Syria, and the issues of terrorism. Just in a few days ago, sadly and tragically, so what has happened in Nairobi. Those ongoing threats are going to keep this global village at each other's throats for a while. So we're not having a united world that is actually saying, well, capital markets are going to grow, this is going to grow, and that is where it will inform where Zimbabwe's scenario is. Now, on Zimbabwe's scenario, we had to change this. I had to change this before the election and post the election. Okay. So before the election, we had to make sure that there was peaceful election. We were looking at two things: peaceful elections and a non-contested outcome of the election. Now, we had one which was undisputed, which was the peaceful election. So that one was done. I think the uncontested was not unanimous. Endorsed by SADC, endorsed by AU, but the losers did not go and congratulate the winners. Now, we've got to be able to say that as Zimbabweans and understand that that dynamic in itself distorts the scenario. Because if the losers, unlike what happened in Kenya, where the losers eventually, after a bit of a quarrel, they went and shook hands and said, well done, you're now my boss, let's move on. But the losers have not. They've gone on to their own places and say, look, yeah, we are still going to claim back victory. So that process in itself distorts business and confidence in the market because you're not united. However, we shouldn't wait for them to actually come and congratulate the losers because the government is in place. So now here's the scenario. If the losers had congratulated the winners, what we would have got into is the top quadrant where this engine or this aeroplane would have been raving at the tarmac just to take off. The conversation in this room would have been totally different. Because the game in a globalization and in a globality is about confidence. So if I am a parent, we've got a daughter, my wife and I. So if I am sending signals that I am not happy with my daughter, and my wife is saying, I'm completely happy. My daughter is always going to say, so if I do this, my dad is going to do this. So there's not going to be enough people or friends of hers who will come into our house and feel so liberated to go into every room and get excited. So they'll be cautious and what if the father now starts behaving like this? So there is always going to be that lack of confidence. So we don't have 100% confidence in our prior period or genuine period kind of processes, or even our adversaries or our detractors. That's the word I was looking for. And Minister, you'd have helped me with that. It's a political word. You don't normally use it in business. We talk about competition. But you can see I'm far away from politics. So our detractors.
I can see you are joining us.
I was grappling for the word, but looking at you, I realized it has to start with a D. Detractors. The best form of this Autobahn takeoff is when your prior adversaries, your prior detractors come and endorse you. This is where the whole thing takes off like a Harrier jet. But my friends, we are not there. Because our detractors and our adversaries, or those who criticized us, have not come to say, look, well done, Zimbabwe. We are so proud of you. You've come of age. Now, that's the problem with the global village. And that's the challenge we have. So we've got to continue to engage. Now, the issue is that we must still carry on with our journey, but we cannot ignore that. We cannot willy-nilly just say, look, it's okay. Britain and America, we don't care about you, go away. They still hold the levers of power in the global village. Unfortunate, and I hate that with a passion. They still do. Now, if they still do, there is need for an engagement with those. So, Minister, I know and I'm confident you're going to be engaging them, all of them. the East, the West, the North, and the South. I know that you're going to do that. So we're not pleading with you to go and engage. We know you will. So what does it mean? It means that your Bretton Woods, your IMF, your World Bank, your Afrexim Bank, your African Development Banks, all of those will begin to also need to be engaged to come back. What we desperately need is a balance of payment support. We need foreign direct investment. We need a way forward with our debt overhead over the years. Now that brings confidence into our country, and it will. So whilst we're still engaging them so that they can agree with us, and they must, the West must agree with the way forward with Zimbabwe. I don't think we can continue to be held at ransom, but we must engage them anyway. So that's the way we're going. Now, where are we right now? Where we are in a gridlock. With everything we've got, we are gridlocked because the liquidity challenge we have has to be unlocked so that we release more funding to our small and medium enterprises, which is where the bulk of the economy is going to be driven from. Now, if there is no money, we will be going out of our houses every day and completely bring nothing. So there is need to unlock this gridlock. This is how, Minister, I believe the major things will need to be dealt with. And I'm glad you're here, and Minister Nyoni as well. I'm glad part of the cabinet is here. We need to be very engaging and make sure that there is no areas of contestation on our indigenization policy. There is no areas that people don't understand. There is clarity that if you come, if you do this, and the clarity is not necessarily for the outsiders. The problem with confidence is that you don't start confidence outwardly. You start confidence inward. So in your organization, people must be confident about what you're doing or what you're manufacturing before you start bringing other people in. So we as Zimbabweans need to be confident across the board that these policies we can carry them forward. We also must make sure that there is transparency in how we are dealing with our whole mining sector. There is just too many things that are causing a lot of unnecessary negative noise out there. So once that begins to work out, we are unlocking a potential, because mining is a quick win because the resources are there. The re-engagement with our DFIs, strengthening of the banking sector, ministers, it's important. The strengthening, the resourcing, the capitalizing of the Reserve Bank is paramount to where we are going. We need to make sure that our lender of last resort is enabled to make sure that the financial markets are much more fluid and they can play the games that they need to do. Today we've got Stewart Bank, who have sponsored this breakfast. And they need to make sure that they can lend amongst each other. But there is a gridlock at the moment. In this gridlock, we have slow recovery on exports, but we're going to have a flood of cheap imports. Because manufacturing is not going to take off in this gridlock. So the cheap imports are here to stay until we unlock the gridlock and make our productive sector much more competitive with the rest of the world. And then if we move sideways, we then move into imports are stronger, and then exports recovery begin to be gradual. We can fast forward this by making sure that we engage the global village aggressively and positively. And so that they understand where we're going and where we're coming from. And also the national vision I was talking about. And then we are taking off and it will be another situation. So having painted that picture, where are the opportunities? The opportunities are, in my view, and this is purely my view, are in agro-processing. Agro-processing will be more competitive once the investment in agriculture is sustained. we would like to see a sustained investment in agriculture because we cannot keep importing food from our neighbors. The mining sector is a clear winner as investors begin to appreciate the indigenization policy framework. However, there's still price instability in some of our resources there. So we need to be very careful how we do the investment, but that is another major win. And we need policy framework to make sure that we beneficiate, the whole economy is beneficiated by the mining sector. Tourism, we're not biased there, but it's a fact. Tourism after UNWTO, after a very peaceful election, is poised for a major jump. The inquiries and the bookings that we're having for the years to come or for the next year are much ahead of what we anticipated. So, because we are a peaceful destination and our product is very attractive. So we're seeing a reignition of the traditional markets, including the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom had almost backed off on Zimbabwe, but it's one of our faster growing markets in terms of arrivals now. And also the traditional, North America, Asia, and so on. And the new markets are also coming in. South America are now coming on. The manufacturing sector is still burdened with a difficult operating environment. They'll be faced with stiff, cheaper imports, as I said earlier on. So they are here to stay. I don't know what you're going to do there, ministers, to make sure that we reignite our manufacturing sector, but they are in serious problem. Now, going back to core business. Going back to core business, there are 5 things I'd like to just highlight, which will maybe highlight where are the opportunities here. The first of the, we need to be very cognizant, having understood the globalization and the globality, the threat to entry to anything that we are doing as business people. The threat to entry here is driven by the supply side of the economies of scale. So this is when firms that produce large volumes enjoy lower cost per unit, employ more efficient technology, or command better terms from suppliers. This is where the challenge is going to be. Minister Nyoni, I'm glad you're here. The moment that there is liquidity and there is investment that is coming through, the bigger guys will be able to get more funding, produce cheaper through the economies of scale. And if there is a smaller guy who's producing and are not able to maximize on the economies of scale, we will, if we don't make sure that we work with the smaller producers, they will be out of business sooner rather than later. Because I will be able to produce at a much cheaper cost than the smaller producer. We are currently consumers. This is the effect that we are having as a nation because of the imports that we have. We are currently consumers rather than producers because the big scale, the economies of scale supply side or the threat of the entry, for us to get into that is that China and the rest of the world and South America, they are producing at a much cheaper rate than us. So we suffer on that sort of the threat to enter. This is also resulting in being net importers. Demand side also, in terms of the threat to entry, demand side also is important to consider. This is the buyer's willingness to pay for the company's product, which increases with the number of other buyers who also patronize. So this is, we're talking about institutionalized loyalty programs, where you almost create a cartel or a monopoly, where buyers are forced to buy from you. And you see this in our economy, that this will continue to be aspects we need to look at. I am excited about the model that Stewart Bank, Econet, EcoCash have. But sooner rather than later, it will be very difficult for anybody to enter into their zone. Because they can supply everything at a much cheaper rate. So the threat to entry, so you might have to think twice if you're thinking of a product that is similar to this enterprise. So you have to think twice about that. Also the capital requirements. The bigger companies globally, world over, are able to access capital than the smaller companies. Yet we know that the small to medium enterprises will create faster employment opportunities than the bigger guys. But the world is working slightly different from that sort of thing. The second point I'd like to, as we go back to core business, the power of suppliers. Now, the supplier group is powerful. It is more concentrated than the industry it supplies to. For example, you find Microsoft is more concentrated than the industry it supplies to. So it becomes a powerful supplier in itself. The supplier group does not depend heavily on the industry for its revenue. In our business, in our sector, we have hotels that run casinos. For example, in South Africa, we've got Sun International, we've got Southern Sun. They are hoteliers, but we and maybe Protea or City Lodge are different hoteliers from them. Because the bulk of the money does not come from rooms revenue. The bulk of the income comes from casinos. So 60% of their revenue does not depend on what they say they are. So when you get that power of suppliers and you go and attack in their sort of zone, they will just use the other resources that they have, and you're always going to be a loser in this. So you need to make sure that you're strong in your area of focus, which is your core business. Supplier products that are differentiated are also show power. So we need to make sure that you have differentiated your products enough to say, for example, pharmaceuticals. Once it's patented, it's yours. You can sell it as Cafimo, and people know that it is there, and you cannot duplicate it and give it another name or no-name brand. People might not know it. Brand it and make sure that it is strong enough. There are no substitute for what the supplier group provides. So some of the things is that to do things that there are no substitutes in what you're providing, so that you also increase the power of your supply base. Look at your unique proposals. Look at your unique proposition. What is your unique selling proposition? What are you going to distinguish yourself from? For example, if you're a pilot or you run a team of pilots, it's not very easy to replace a pilot overnight. So it's a service you provide, and you robust that and you sell that sort of service. As I'm saying. The power of buyers is also important to consider. Customer group has negotiating power. If you have got strong buyers, you run a real risk of going under. There are few buyers or large volumes per buyer, and if the buyer says, look, I'm the only one who can buy. If your product is only going to be bought by one or two people, the buyer has strong power over them. The industry's products, if they are standardized and they are undifferentiated, the buyers have strong strength over your product. So analyze and say, look, do the industry have standardized that you can only do it this way, so you cannot be creative around it. If the buyers face few switching costs in changing suppliers, then you have a problem. This is where, thank you, Minister. The Minister has to go. Thank you so much for being with us. You are one of us, Minister. We sent you to government, you are one of us. So, the retail is under siege at the moment because buyers can switch very easily. And there are no-name brands. It's functionality versus anything else. The buyer can easily interrogate backwards as well, or integrate backwards. So that's another thing. Last is the rivalry amongst existing competitors. We also need to make sure that is there rivalry amongst existing competitors in your sector. And if there are, just know that competitors, when they are numerous or are roughly equal in size and power, then the margins are going to be quite low, and it's going to be quite risky. The threat of substitutes is also high. That's a fifth. It also offers an attractive price-performance trade-off to the industry product. For example, Skype versus voice calls through terrestrial and mobile networks. The bias cost of switching to the substitute is low, and the technology gadget. So what I'm just saying here is that we need to go back to our core business. We need to understand globalization. We need to understand globality. We cannot run forever. We cannot be conglomerate leaders and be perfect in all and be strong in what we're doing. We need to focus on what we do most and do best. And that is going to give us those opportunities. But as I say, in this country, it's agro-processing because we've got the land, and the land is fertile, and we're told the rainy season is going to be good this year. It's going to be in mining, it's going to be in tourism, it's going to be in support services. But manufacturing is still going to have a long road to go because the cheaper imports are going to dominate for a while. But we must not be discouraged. We must engage a policy framework that allows more capital to come in. And those are just my thoughts, and I hope they would help in pursuing what are the crossover issues as we go forward. Thank you.
Doc, thank you very much. I think it is clear testament that he is a sound chief executive because he's able to articulate all issues that affect business and not just predominantly in tourism. Okay, we're going to take a couple of questions before we get to the exciting part of this morning's program, which is networking. So are there any questions?
My question is, now, the economy is reeling, we all know that. We all need cash, but what can be done in the next 6 months?
So we all need?
We all need cash, and the question is, what can be done in the next 6 months? Maybe you have your crystal ball there with you.
In our hands. I think in most cases, we do also have an overcapitalized business model. Look at what you have. Do you really need what you have to move forward, to unlock a bit of cash out of your business? So I've seen certain people saying we are waiting for lines of credit, we are waiting for cash. But you then look at their balance sheet, they're sitting on assets that are not generating any income whatsoever. Shouldn't you be getting rid of those assets? Shouldn't you actually offload them? Because, and I know why we're not offloading them, because we think we're offloading them for a song. But you'd rather have the cash. So if you could offload them for 10,000 and you thought in a good time you could have offloaded them for 15,000, 10,000 in your hands gets you going and gets you to multiply your business going forward. So I think it's a rationalizing of a balance sheet, number one. Number two is focusing on what we must, like on core business, because we're spending too much energy and time and costs on also. Number three is cut back on overheads. And I am popular in saying that overheads walks on two legs. It's you and me. So those are the sort of things that you can do whilst we wait for lines of credit and the liquidity to soften up a bit. But we can't wait until that is done. So we've got to live with what we have. We've become very consumptive by nature. So we need to produce something, we need to create value, but we also need to look at our balance sheet. And I think our balance sheet is bloated. In most cases, we've got bloated personal balance sheet. You look at the cars you have, do you need all the cars at a personal level? You look at the houses you have, do you need all of them? And yet your business is suffering on the corner. You can't sell that house in Glenmore.
Thanks, Doc. We've got another question here.
I think it might be a very unfair question, but since you raised the issue in your opening remarks, I will ask this question. How do you suggest that in terms of confidence building, since the losers did not congratulate the winners and so on, how do you think we can proceed? Because this is a very fundamental issue, and I think it is at the core of the confidence that this country requires.
Because I don't understand some of the complexities of politics and so on. But my simplistic view is that whenever there is a very intense contestation, there's always going to be emotions. So allow for a period of emotions to subside. And I think we've noticed that in the past 6 weeks, you know, reality sets in. You know, the losers realize, you know what, actually, we lost, yeah. You know, immediately you think, well, let's do something, we might get this thing back. And the winners also realize, oh, we won, actually. But what do we do now? Where are we supposed to go? So there's a period, or a allow period. So sometimes it's allow the emotions to get out of the way, and then we begin to re-engage amongst ourselves. So the first point is that I would like to see the losers and the winners engaging as Zimbabweans. That's the desire. We cannot be polarized forever. So with our differences, let's move on. Let the losers do that. So that's what I think. The next thing is that the losers must begin to also not be activist in approach, but also begin to point towards the issues that need to be